Shadow Hack. Chapter 141, One Customer Shouldn't Bother Two Shopkeepers. Formidable killing intent, formidable defense, formidable blade skills. At this moment, while Li Yunmu's group of 3 was busy wiping out the pride of rooster dragons, in the forest underneath, there was a human squad spectating the battle in the sky with astonishment. This squad was comprised of 4 people who were around 20 years old. The leader of them was a youth whose age didn't cross 23. All of the members were covered in silver crystal flux armor and had opened all of the 14 points of silver crystal layer. In other words, every one of this group of people had extraordinary strength. Each of them had a cultivation of peak silver crystal layer. At this moment though they were using special tools to watch Li Yunmu's battle from more than 10 miles away. If some experienced fluxer discovered this squad, he certainly wouldn't find it difficult to recognize them even in the middle of night. Or that what they were trying was extremely dangerous. They were dimensional monster hunters. This was a 4-man squad of dimensional monster hunters. They possessed plentiful survival experience in the dimensional battlefield, had comparatively formidable cultivation strength, and even had all sorts of special equipment and weapons to chase and kill dimensional beasts. Clearly, the squad's aim tonight had been to hunt a rooster dragon. But they were hunters, so they certainly couldn't go on a bloodbath like Li Yunmu. They would usually wait patiently throughout the night until the best chance to attack. Only when a rooster dragon separated from the pride would they rush in to capture or kill him. It wouldn't be the slightest exaggeration to say that with the members of their battle squad as well as their professional equipment, successfully hunting 2 or 3 rooster dragons in one night was nothing more than a dream. However, at this moment, they encountered 3 unprecedented rule breakers. The trio had no outward signs to recognize them by, and were full of mysteries and acted extremely savagely. At this moment, Li Yunmu and other 2's actions left this squad of 3 male and 1 female dimensional hunters completely dumbfounded. Heavens! When did such fierce people appear on our 6 continents? Who are they? All of them glanced at each other with confusion on their faces. It wasn't that they were inexperienced, rather, these fluxers didn't belong to the central continent. They were Neptune's people from Northern Ocean continent. Perhaps they had heard the name of Li Yunmu from the Fluxer Association, but they didn't pay any attention to it and didn't remember it. This was identical to how an average slum dweller wouldn't care much about a celebrity. Bang! Another rooster dragon corpse fell heavily to the ground. Even though the squad was 10 kilometers away from it, but they could still sense the earth shaking a little. 35th, these 3 people have already killed 35 rooster dragons. The amount they will get for them. All of the squad subconsciously gulped down saliva. They couldn't count the coins, and neither did they want to. The earnings of these 3 in one night would be equal to a month's great business for them, while acting with such cautiousness. But was it over? Naturally, that wasn't the case. Soon the squad saw an even more startling scene. The last formidable rooster dragon was surrounded by all 3 people and they began to beat him up with fists. After the 3 of them punched him more than 10 times, the beast had lost most of its energy and become motionless. One of the trio then forcibly collected it into his storage batch. Identical flux energy strength, as well as terrifying defense and formidable skills. And those wings which surpassed the experts in temporal layer in flying. On top of that, they possessed some item with enormous dimensional space that could easily collect a living dimensional beast. Frightening, these 3 people are really frightening. Although there were a few rooster dragon corpses that had fallen in front of the squad, its members simply didn't have the courage to go pick them up. They could only watch as the 3 young fluxers collected their harvest and rapidly flew away. Did you record it? The leader of the squad asked with a serious expression. I tried to, but since they were so far away from us and it's nighttime, everything's fuzzy. Their true features and characteristics cannot be seen, the only female in the squad answered. Unnecessary. Given the ability of these people, they certainly won't be nobodies. Fortunately they didn't discover us. Let's move. Li Yunmu truly hadn't discovered the existence of this squad of dimensional hunters, since the system wasn't omnipotent. The other party had been observing from more than 10 kilometers away, and the system couldn't monitor such a large area. But this wasn't important, what mattered was that Li Yunmu's blood had begun to boil. 35 rooster dragon corpses and 1 live rooster dragon should fetch him quite a fortune. He quickly led the 2 shadows away and found a mountain to descend upon. There, he entered the virtual dimension. That's right, since he had reaped the rewards, he must change them to real money. Li Yunmu once again went to the Good News Pavilion. The old man quickly rushed out from the rear garden and welcomed him. From his appearance, it was clear that he had been sleeping and was just woken up by the shopkeeper. However, there wasn't the slightest trace of resentment on the face of the old man. Instead he happily asked, "Little brother, looking at your expression, it seems that you've gotten something good again." "That's right, but I'm not sure whether you'll be able to take my business this time." Li Yunmu smiled slightly. His mood was extremely good, given that he had discovered the territory of rooster dragons and even hunted some down. Since that was the case, why shouldn't he be in a good mood? "Tell me then. Since we have opened a business, naturally we have sufficient capital." "Little brother, you shouldn't underestimate our small shop," the old man said, with a faint smile. Li Yunmu nodded but didn't say anything. Since the other party had the confidence, then he was relieved. In fact, the Good News Pavilion wasn't the best shop in business for selling rooster dragons. However, one customer shouldn't bother 2 shopkeepers. As to what concerned the price, Li Yunmu was convinced that no one would decline a person like him who had killed a large number of rooster dragons. Although Li Yunmu didn't know what kind of strange abilities other Fluxers had, he was certain that there wasn't anyone who could kill as many rooster dragons as he had. This was taking into consideration everyone within Heavenly Cloud Steel Castle, even the Rainbow Crystal Fluxers, for none of them could be his equals. Li Yunmu went to where there was some empty space and waved his hand towards the ground. Immediately, a complete corpse of a rooster dragon appeared in front of him. Price. Attacked by arrows of a ranged attacker, with successive arrows hitting the same wound. Furthermore, there are also traces of destructive type thunder energy. Once he saw the corpse, the expression of the old man changed. A range attacker who possesses thunder attribute dark flux energy. "Old man, you know too much." "I want a price," Li Yunmu said, moving directly to the point. 1.25 million, the old man quoted the price without any hesitation. "All right, here are 23 more. The payment will be same as before, I only want flux crystals." Li Yunmu waved his hand, and instantly the entire courtyard was filled with the corpses of rooster dragons. When the old man saw this scene, he opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out of his mouth. Chapter 142, Expanding the Heavenly World. So many rooster dragons, the old man slightly stiffened. "Can you deal with them?" Li Yunmu said, not moving from his spot. "Yes, naturally yes." The old man nodded with a bitter smile. This time, he finally became serious towards this big client. After all, there weren't many people in the entire 5th dimension who could hunt so many rooster dragons. In fact, there wouldn't be many in all the 6 continents. When he examined how these rooster dragons had died, he found out that all of them were killed by a range attacker who targeted the same spot on their bodies. This allowed the lightning energy to invade their bodies and kill them. On the basis of the offensive strength and accuracy of arrows, this range attacker certainly belonged among the best. What was even more terrifying thing, though, was that he possessed the thunder flux energy, which was known to be one of the best type of destructive type energies. "All right, this can be done. Although this shop doesn't specialize in dimensional beast materials, since we are indebted to little brother for coming to the Good News Pavilion first, this old man cannot act in bad faith. For each of these intact rooster dragon corpses, this is the price which this old man can buy them for." The old man told the number with a motion of his fingers. 1.35 million, the price of each of the rooster dragons was increased by 100,000. So for 23, the increase would be 2.3 million dimensional coins, which was a huge sum in itself. Li Yunmu had to accept that this old man was acting with ample sincerity. Can you still make a profit at this price? Li Yunmu didn't reply directly but rather looked at the other party with suspicion. As long as we start operating timely and sell them at an auction, I won't lie to you little brother, but earning a profit of 300,000 for each of them won't be a problem, the old man answered frankly. So much? Li Yunmu was startled. He hadn't expected that these intact corpses of rooster dragons had a price above 1.80 million dimensional coins. This amount was even higher than he had expected. You aren't regretting it, right? The old man asked, beaming with a smile. Naturally I'm not. I neither have the time nor the resources to move them around myself. All right then, let's not waste any more time, you quickly get some money for me, Li Yunmu said with a smile. Every social circle has its own rules. The extra money was bound to fall in the hands of others, so Li Yunmu didn't see the need to make a fuss for some little profit. Soon, the old man returned with a few people carrying big trunks. Li Yunmu noticed in one glance that these were filled with stable flux energy crystals. There was the least amount of silver ones, followed by the black, while the highest number was of the ordinary crystals. Li Yunmu didn't go to count them one by one, just stretched his hand and collected them all into his heavenly world. You aren't going to count? No need, I trust you old man, Li Yunmu said without paying any attention to it. But, in truth, he didn't really need to count them one by one. As long as the system scanned them, he would know the exact number. Li Yunmu obtained 31 million dimensional coins through this business deal. The young will certainly pass the old in no time. Little brother sure is someone who will accomplish great things, the old man said with a nod. I still have one more batch. Li Yunmu didn't pay any attention to the old man's words. Whether he could accomplish great deeds or not, that will depend only on his personal strength and not flattery by others. He waved his hand once again and 12 more corpses of rooster dragons appeared. Each one of these 12 were chopped in 2 parts. Although this batch also contained complete corpses, but they were far inferior to the previous ones, which were killed with the underworld raven bow. 1.05 million, do you agree? The old man's pupil shrank. At this moment, he had more or less guessed the identity of this youth in front of him. So this person was far more terrifying compared to the rumors he had heard a few days ago. However, wasn't this person supposed to be at the city lord's residence right now? According to what he had heard during the day, this person was personally invited by the goddess of heavenly Cloud City to the city lord residence. Did he sneak out in the night and ran off to the Setting Sun Wilderness Garrison camp to hunt down this group of rooster dragons? When the old man had seen those rooster dragons killed by a range attacker, he was greatly startled. But right now, he couldn't even imagine how a low-level fluxer could cut down these overlords of the sky in close combat. Formidable, his battle prowess was really heaven-defying. Deal. Li Yunmu nodded and confirmed the price. Now that he had returned to the 5th dimension, he didn't care much about his identity being revealed. After all, unless a flux master intervened, Li Yunmu didn't fear anyone in the entire 5th dimension. Even if a large group of fluxers surrounded him from all sides, he could just rely on wings of the wind to escape. In this transaction, Li Yunmu earned a total 12.5 million dimensional coins. Also, this is the best item of today, please name the price. The next instant, Li Yunmu took out the energetic rooster dragon from his heavenly world. Together with Li Yun and Li Feng, he had repeatedly used the world-killing fist sealing energy on it. After being hit by one fist after another, each of whom was laced with sealing energy, the rooster dragon had lost all of its energy. On top of that, the vitality it had replenished while being locked up was then absorbed by Li Yunmu's heavenly world. So for the time being, regardless of wherever it was released or not, the rooster dragon didn't possess the energy to move. The old shopkeeper was greatly astonished. This time, his heart couldn't remain calm anymore. He immediately called some of his subordinates and used a method to once again empty the beast of any energy it had replenished. Li Yunmu had to accept that humans really possessed many clever tricks. 50 million no, 65 million. This rooster dragon is like a king among the group you presented before. Deal. Li Yunmu laughed. Naturally he knew this fact because system had said that this rooster dragon's strength was at 39th grade. In other words, it only needed to increase its strength by 1 grade to enter the golden crystal layer at 40th grade. You should prepare yourself mentally and amass sufficient resources. Many deals like this will follow in the future. After Li Yunmu received the payment for the 3rd time, he turned to leave. Oh, I forgot something. If you can, then help me to look after multi-dimensional crystal trading shop. Li Yunmu didn't wait for the old man to reply and quickly departed from the good news pavilion and withdrew to the 5th dimension. When the old man heard Li Yunmu's request, his speculations were finally confirmed. He was no certain that the person talking to him was Li Yunmu, because he had also heard about this multi-dimensional crystal trading shop. It was an extremely small shop. However, because the owner of was a beauty, the business was very good. Yet compared to Good News Pavilion and businesses of other big families, this shop was just a drop in the ocean. But since this youth was the main owner of this small shop, apparently, it would be better to establish good relations in advance. The old man quickly arrived at a decision and soon after instructed a maid, at dawn, tomorrow. You should deliver some of these 3rd layer or higher flux crystals to the Muse's shop at the lowest price and agree to a consignment sale. After withdrawing from virtual dimension world, Li Yunmu returned to the mountain in the wilderness. The 2 shadows Li Yun and Li Feng were motionlessly standing on either side of his body, while some distance away from them lay the chopped bodies of more than 10-dimensional beasts who had come out at night. There were ordinary crystal, black crystal, as well as even some silver crystal beasts. Li Yunmu collected their dimensional crystals and then placed their corpses within the heavenly world. Although the value of these corpses couldn't compare to those of the rooster dragons, but they could act as bonus change. Furthermore, the corpses of the 2 silver crystal dimensional beasts were even somewhat valuable. After collecting the small change, he also gathered the bodies of these dimensional beasts. In any case, his heavenly world had sufficient landmass for the moment. Moreover, the corpses wouldn't rot there anyway. Li Yunmu was now making sufficient preparations for the moment when he took over the Cold Cloud City, including its earnings. He swept a glance over the recently obtained flux crystals, but he didn't pay much attention to them. After all, these were just stable flux energy crystals, he didn't need them. His crystal armor would only require king-grade dimensional crystals in the future. In the heavenly world, one by one, he spilled out all the trunks filled with dimensional crystal. This time, he had poured over 100 million worth, a truly unprecedented amount. Due to this, Li Yunmu instantly sensed the land beneath his feet starting to expand rapidly. Chapter 143, Hacking Everywhere. Once the amount of dimensional crystals worth 100 millions was poured out, the heavenly world's land began to increase quickly. It took 10 whole seconds for it to stabilize again. When Li Yunmu surveyed the area, he could only reveal a bitter smile. Only now did he understand why the Flux ancestor had established the Tower of Glory to bait people. Wanting to become a true deity and stand above the whole world, not afraid of anything, was really a path of no return. Accomplishing this, just by relying on oneself was extremely difficult, even with the assistance of the system. However, presently it was only the initial stage of the heavenly world's expansion. Thus, the increase in the heavenly world's landmass could be considered as quite fast. Without Li Yunmu realizing it, the place had already expanded to 1,200 square meters. That's right, I need to work harder. Li Yunmu encouraged himself. System, how much world power do I possess? Can you provide me the exact numbers? Replying to host, you presently possess roughly enough world power to absorb an all-out attack of an initial stage silver crystal fluxer. Alright. Li Yunmu's spirits were instantly raised. Everyone believed that he, Li Yunmu, relied on Li Sek's various secret flux methods, which allowed his battle prowess to shoot through the heavens. But how could they know that his true hidden secret was the heavenly world? As long as he continued to expand it, soon, he wouldn't need to fear even flux masters. Then let's continue. This time, Li Yunmu decided to proceed towards his goal, the Moro Mountain Tenebrous Hidden Domain, only to find the entrance to the secret place as described within the few damaged runic pages. His final target was still to increase his strength. Since presently, he had discovered the territorial space of rooster dragons, he immediately delayed his target and again opened his personal information. Experience points, 68,700. Ability points, 26,100. Space elements, 2062. Blood Fiend points, 1368. The system had already added a new parameter, Blood Fiend points, to Li Yunmu's personal profile. They were the data points calculated by the system to facilitate the deity execution. By killing dimensional beasts or even humans, he would obtain these Blood Fiend points. The more formidable were the life forms he killed, the more points he would obtain. Accumulating 10,000 points would mean that Li Yunmu had crossed the lowest threshold to utilize the deity execution skill, not to slice through the body, but only the mind. This one skill was Li Yunmu's real trump card to inflict serious damage to existences at the level of flux masters, thus, he valued it a lot. Naturally, he didn't dare to use it lightly. After all, using this skill would not only exhaust him to the limit, but would also greatly drop the baleful aura of Blood Fiend Cold Thunder energy within the sword. At this moment, even Li Yunmu himself also wasn't clear at what level was his warblade. After all, he had fused it with the Thunder Rune, Freezing Rune, Blood Fiend energy, as well as the vengeful soul of Dwarf Witch King. If the blade was viewed as an ordinary fifth-dimensional treasure weapon, then it would be a great injustice to it. The unleashing of deity execution required the Dwarf Witch King's vengeful soul to have become part of the blade. If one said that the blade's power had attained the level of sixth-dimensional treasure weapon, then that person wouldn't be necessarily correct either. After the system's detailed analysis, the only conclusion it could reach was that this treasure blade had undergone some unknown evolution and was probably the only one of its kind in this world. The final conclusion was that if Li Yunmu continued to accumulate large amounts of Blood Fiend energy, then it would probably continue to evolve. Thus, the Blood Fiend points became the fourth most important data for him. Almost 70,000 experience points. Looking at his profile information, Li Yunmu quickly discovered that unbeknownst to him, the amount of experience points accumulated by him had increased again. He still required slightly more than 30,000 points to produce the third shadow. Increasing the number of shadows to 3, what significance would it have for him? This was really too important. After settling everything, Li Yunmu took out the meat and ate a little, followed by drinking some fresh water. He then once again opened his wings of the wind and led Li Yun and Li Feng in search of rooster dragons. The shadows were completely synchronized with him. The only point where they weren't on the same step was the heavenly world. When Li Yunmu wanted to collect the corpses of rooster dragons, he needed to personally place them in his heavenly world. While flying in the air, Li Yunmu inquired, "System, can you scan the current hack map and point out the locations of all rooster dragons?" For the time being, it isn't possible. The system will acquire this function only after being upgraded to the 5th level. Good. Li Yunmu nodded. There were still a few days until the end of the 10 days. Once they passed, he would be able to upgrade the system's intelligence to the 4th level. Going by these calculations, it'll be around half a month or so before he will upgrade it to the 5th level. After more than half an hour of searching, Li Yunmu finally discovered another pride of rooster dragons far off into the distance. However, there were much fewer of them compared to the previous time. The pride only had 10 beasts. Slay. The 10 rooster dragons were unable to even get close to Li Yunmu and the 2 shadows. One by one, they were all sniped by the 3 who had transformed into range attackers. All of the beats died, leaving behind completely intact corpses. After dealing with them, Li Yunmu collected almost 20 million dimensional coins. If the speed at which he was making money was made public, then even rainbow crystal fluxers might turn red with envy. Not to mention that, like before, Li Yunmu had deliberately left the most powerful rooster dragon alive. Together with the shadows, he then used the sealing energy of the world-killing fist and forcefully sealed it, then placed it in the heavenly world. After all, even if the corpses of rooster dragons were intact, their value was far inferior compared to that of a living one who could be tamed and used as a mount. Capable people who can walk in front of everyone naturally will have higher earnings, but this was still not enough for Li Yunmu. After half an hour, he again encountered a pride of rooster dragons. This time he was extremely fortunate and encountered an extremely large pride which had more than 70 of these beasts. Li Yunmu didn't dare to use the underworld raven blood summoning. The ravens who hadn't become formidable after battling and absorbing the vitality of their comrades would have no chance to tear through the skin of these sky hegemons. For more than 70 silver crystal rooster dragons who possessed the Asian dragon bloodline, apart from 12 light rainbow crystal king dimensional beasts, no one was their rival. After all, among the silver crystal dimensional beasts of the 5th dimension only a few of them would gather together in large numbers. But today, the pride of rooster dragons had encountered this butcher, Li Yunmu. Kill, kill, kill. It was 3 against 73 rooster dragons, fighting from the distance and then in close combat. The massacre lasted for a whole hour, before the curtain dropped. With the assistance of Wings of the Wind, Li Yunmu fought at many places during that night, over an area of several hundred kilometers. Gradually, the color of the sky started to brighten. At this moment, Heavenly Cloud City Warzone's official forum also began to become lively. Hey, 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 where are the people of the large clans of our Heavenly Cloud City? I want to know what happened after our Cloud City's goddess personally escorted Li Yunmu to the city lord's mansion. Hee, I also want to know, my little heart is extremely anxious right now. Anxious my A*S, regardless of whoever Lin Yuero chooses, it certainly won't be you. There shouldn't be any here. The descendants of these large families who can enter the city lord's residence wouldn't come here to chat on our dirty stellar network. Akem, I don't know about those sons of large clans, but I've heard about something. Last night, Li Yunmu stayed at the city lord's residence. What? My god, don't tell me our goddess has also fallen for the desires of the mundane world? I'm so worried now. I request you to not spread such blasphemous rumors about my heart's goddess, who is Li Yunmu. Even though he advanced past the 15th level of the Tower of Glory, but what qualifications does he have to attach his name to our goddess? Yes, you're absolutely right. Lin Yuero had entered the temporal layer when she was 20 years old. Compared to her, Li Yunmu is just a low-level fluxer and nothing more. Chapter 144, The Accumulation of 100,000 Points. At this moment in the city lord's residence, Lin Qingyang withdrew from the stellar network with an ashen complexion. He had been confined by his father, not understanding why, given that his father was a sage, he let Li Yunmu go. But this wasn't important, what mattered was that he had just found out from the stellar network that this stranger had been asked by his elder sister to spend the night at their home. What kind of place was the city lord's residence? It was the mansion of the supreme ruler governing over a huge territory. Moreover, Lin Qingyang was extremely clear that since the time his father had suffered the backlash due to using the forbidden technique to become a flux sage, he hadn't let any outsider stay in his house for the last couple years. But now, young master, eldest daughter has commanded that you aren't allowed to leave Green Vine Courtyard. Get lost. Since the time I was born, which place in the city lord's mansion couldn't I go to? In a fit of rage, Lin Qingyang pushed away the servant and immediately went towards Red Rain Courtyard. Young Master Qingyang, you aren't allowed to enter young Miss Courtyard. Just as he was about to enter Red Rain Courtyard, having pushed open its gate, a 30-something female blocked his way. Get lost! Lin Qingyang pushed her away as well, in his fury. However, the next instant, his whole body was pushed backwards by an invisible energy, he was forced to retreat more than 10 steps. When Lin Qingyang slightly calmed down, he realized that this female servant wasn't an ordinary maid. She was the servant dispatched by Blue Cloud Sect to follow Lin Yuero. Her cultivation base had already entered the Flux Master realm. Although her potential was limited, but a person like him who was only a half-step rainbow crystal fluxer couldn't compare to someone who had a higher cultivation than his by a whole realm. Yi, I want to see my sister. That's not possible, it is presently inconvenient for young miss to see people. Yi, let him enter, Lin Yuero said from inside. Yi was slightly startled, as was Lin Qingyang. He hadn't expected that his sister would surprisingly go as far as to make an exception and allow him entrance. Instantly, his previous anger nearly dispersed and he entered the courtyard gleefully while avoiding Yi. Why are you trying to find me so furiously? Lin Yuero asked, looking over at him. Lin Qingyang instantly launched a flurry of questions. Why? How can you allow that country bumpkin from a small tower stay overnight at the city lord's residence? Don't tell me you really believe that there is some great sect behind him? I really hadn't expected Dad to go so silly, but, sister, you're also the same. Dad passed away, Lin Yuero said, with a faint sigh. What, passed away? Lin Qingyang blurted out. Soon, though, his whole being went numb. You mean Dad left this world? Yes. For a moment, Lin Qingyang sank into a daze, as if he had been struck by a bolt of lightning. His father had passed away, the backbone supporting this city lord's residence, the majestic Flux Sage had fallen. A chill went down Lin Qingyang's body. The previous pride he'd possessed dispersed, but soon, like a person grabbing onto the last straw, he anxiously asked, what about that Pisces jade pendant? Shut your mouth. Lin Yuero's eyes suddenly hardened. She had never expected that her little brother wouldn't understand the seriousness of this matter. He had unexpectedly blurted out this sort of an important secret without thinking anything. If their father hadn't been so soft-hearted, he wouldn't have revealed this secret to her younger brother. No, sis, one portion of that Pisces jade pendant belongs to me. At this instant, Lin Qingyang had gone crazy. If their father passed away, then so be it. The most important thing right now was that this precious treasure must fall into his hands. Father gave it to me and Li Yunmu, besides, it's of no use to you. Given your innate cultivation talent, you have no hope of becoming a flux master in your lifetime. Qingyang, you've awakened because of resources. Obey me and you will be able to pass your days without any worries. Lin Yuero hadn't yet finished speaking, but Lin Qingyang was unable to hear any more. Only one sentence filled his mind. His father had given the Pisces jade pendant to Li Yunmu and his sister, then wouldn't it mean once he thought of this, he went berserk. No, I'm the young master of the city lord's residence. The only son of my father, so that jade pendant is mine. I can also practice dual cultivation. Sister, I will dual cultivate with you, I want you, you are mine. Lin Qingyang's eyes were red by now. He suddenly rushed towards Lin Yuero as if he had gone completely crazy. You effing b-a-tard. Lin Yuero had never thought that her younger brother would turn out to be such a beast. To her surprise, his mind was filled with such filthy thoughts. It was no wonder then that he had been hostile towards Li Yunmu from the start. She waved in Lin Qingyang's direction. Sister Yu, I will have to trouble you. Yes, young miss. A trace of disgust flashed through Yuyi's eyes, and she grabbed Lin Qingyang. What do you want? Release me. You've lost your mind. Before the situation of Heavenly Cloud City stabilizes, it'd be better if you stayed within the hidden chamber. Lin Yuero's good-looking face was icy cold. Before Lin Qingyang was taken away, he suddenly caught sight of a pile of clothing which was extremely conspicuous. These clothes were really too eye-catching, because the Red Rain courtyard, where no male had ever entered before, surprisingly had a set of male clothing. You surprisingly made him stay here the whole night. Lin Qingyang lost all energy at this moment. Li Yunmu was surprisingly already involved sexually with his sister. Li Yunmu is the person who father chose. He is my future man, so of course he has the right to reside here. Yi, take away his stellar comm and put him in one of the hidden chambers. Don't let him out until the situation stabilizes. Bang! Another rooster dragon was sliced into two by Li Yunmu and fell from the sky. Li Yunmu looked at the color of the sky and discovered that it was already dawn. He temporarily stopped his attacks. Instantly, his body flashed and he entered the heavenly world. At this moment the place was densely packed with rooster dragon corpses, as well as the dead bodies of some other dimensional beasts. The latter had been cut down in passing while searching for more rooster dragons. At a glance, Li Yunmu estimated that the number of corpses shouldn't be less than 1,000. Outrageous! This time Li Yunmu had joined his shadows and went all out while hacking, and surprisingly killed more than 1,000 dimensional beasts. The strength of these beasts ranged from ordinary crystal to silver crystal layer, and, in fact, there was even a corpse of a golden crystal dimensional beast. Naturally, the 179 enormous rooster dragon corpses were the most eye-catching. Well, after the 17 beasts that were still alive, sealed within the heavenly world. At this moment, these rooster dragons with their bloodline and formidable physical bodies were unable to resist the heavenly world's power of the starry sky. One by one, all the small stars above released a trace of world power which combined together to form the overall energy of 1,200 stars. The 17 formidable rooster dragons were restrained so tightly that they were unable to budge in the slightest. Outside the heavenly world, the amount of world energy which could be utilized by Li Yunmu was restricted to the initial silver crystal layer. But inside, he was the god and could easily maneuver 10 times more compared to outside. So if Li Yunmu wanted to restrain the beasts, they didn't have the energy to resist. System, examine the amount of experience points I've accumulated recently. Host, the total amount of experience points you've collected has reached 108,369 points. I've broken through 100,000. The enormous amount of experience points Li Yunmu had earned during the night from killing almost 200 rooster dragons finally allowed him to reach the required amount. My third shadow, come out. Li Yunmu used up 100 experience points without the slightest hesitation and gave the command to congeal the third shadow. Chapter 145, Miracle. 6%, 17%, 43%, 97%. After few minutes, the third shadow was congealed successfully. In the future, you will be called Li Tian. Clearly, Li Yunmu didn't have any talent in naming. Heaven, earth, wind, cloud, one presently only leader remained out of these. However, the names weren't important. What mattered was that the number of Li Yunmu's shadows had increased by 1. From now on he would have one more duplicate, whether it was normal hacking or dimensional battlefield for space elements. His efficiency would increase in whatever he did. Quickly, Li Yunmu used his newest shadows data and synchronized it with an avatar on the dimensional battlefield. However, while configuring the avatar, he didn't set Li Tian's body structure to be perfect as he'd done before. After all, Li Yun was built like this, and Li Feng was also built like this. If he established Li Tian's avatar with more or less the same body stature, people may become suspicious of cloning. Height should be set at 1.78 m, body weight around 70 kilograms, beautiful looks. Okay, avatar established. The next instant, Li Tian entered the dimensional monster battlefield. Li Yunmu chose that he should fight in the monster battlefield. His choice of weaponry was primary weapon bow, secondary weapon blade. Equipment was once again that of an armored soldier. The main priority for Li Yunmu right now was to increase the proficiency of his archery foundation. That's right, he had realized that to get closer to the war god class, for the time being, he didn't need to be proficient in all sorts of fighting styles. What mattered to him was to be proficient in both close combat and long-distance fighting. If he could master these two different styles, then he wouldn't have any obvious weak points. Besides, the attacks of ranged attackers used the compressed flux energy arrows. Due to this, the penetrating and explosive power of such attacks was naturally more formidable compared to those of close combat. For example, while hunting the rooster dragons, Li Yunmu naturally didn't miss the fact that long-distance fighting was much more effective. In the morning, Li Yun and Li Feng automatically entered the dimensional battlefield, as was their usual schedule. Li Tian, on the other hand, went to the monster battlefield to earn proficiency points for flux skills. Perfect. Li Yunmu was pleasantly surprised by the amount, which had appeared in the notifications once the third was by his side, that was required to congeal the fourth shadow. This time, the experience points required weren't increased 10 times, to 1 million experience points, rather only to 200,000. This was 5 times less than what Li Yunmu had imagined, so he was quite happy. The next instant he entered the virtual dimension world and unhurriedly walked towards the good news pavilion. Once the old shopkeeper saw Li Yunmu, his face lit up. He had an extremely hard time imagining that just 6 or 7 hours after settling the previous business this person would once again make a visit. "You've brought the same goods as last night?" the old shopkeeper cautiously asked, with a strange solemnity to his voice. "Yes, do you have the funds ready?" Li Yunmu laughed. Yes, fortunately you gave me the reminder last night to be mentally prepared. At that time I commanded people to prepare the funds right away." The old shopkeeper revealed a bitter smile. He had never anticipated that the efficiency of this youth would be so terrifying. Yes, it really frightened this old man who had seen many things in his time. In less than 10 hours, this person had hunted down another group of rooster dragons. Moreover, from the looks of it, the amount of goods this time was even higher than the last time. There was no need to say anything, the deal was what mattered. Without saying anything, the old man hurried the transaction. Li Yunmu arrived within the rear courtyard and swept his hand out. Instantly, the place filled with corpses of rooster dragons. There weren't many of them though, only 179. "Let's complete the deal." There was no change in Li Yunmu's expression, but the old man, as well as his partners, were so shocked from seeing these many corpses of silver crystal layer hegemons of the sky that they couldn't speak for a long time. "Did you kill all of them last night?" "You shouldn't ask other questions, old man. You're being excessive." Okay, it was my mistake. Someone bring first-rate food and wine. You all quickly settle this bill, don't waste little brother's precious time." Old man cheerfully smiled and loudly commanded his staff at once. After half an hour, many partners hurriedly rushed in to settle the bill. Out of the 179 rooster dragon corpses, 93 were completely intact. All of them were shot down by a ranged attacker. The price of every one of these was still at 1.35 million. As for the rest, incomplete rooster dragon corpses, their bill was settled at a price of 1.05 million pet unit. Li Yunmu once again received an enormous amount of money, obtaining flux crystals worth 215 million. However, all of this was just the start. There was even more profit that was soon to come. Next, under the old man's gaze which was filled with expectation, Li Yunmu threw out 15 live rooster dragons. This wasn't all he had, because he left 2 most powerful, 39th grade ones in his heavenly world. Among the rooster dragons which were captured alive, every one of them was stronger compared to those that were killed. The majority of the captured ones possessed strength between 35th to 38th grade. The final price for these 15 living rooster dragons reached up to 900 million. Even the number of trunks loaded with flux crystal crossed 10. The old man had to admit that this transaction would be counted as top-tier business even at the Heavenly Dragon Pavilion controlled by Heavenly Dragon Tang family. He'd had to transfer the funds from all his shop's branches to complete this deal. After collecting the flux crystals, Li Yunmu immediately departed. However, before leaving, he left a line which allowed the old shopkeeper to breathe a sigh of relief. "I won't be hunting again for the time being." This wasn't because he didn't want to, but rather because all the rooster dragon prides in the setting sun Garrison domain had already been cleaned out by him in one night. There may be some smaller prides remaining, but since searching for them would be very time-consuming, Li Yunmu naturally wouldn't waste time on it like a fool. In a split second, he once again logged out of the virtual dimension world. Soon after, with an aching heart, he poured out more than a dozen trunks loaded with flux crystals worth 1100 million into his heavenly world. He had to say that this heavenly world was a bottomless pit, the number of resources it required was beyond counting. It was no wonder then that even a person like Heavenly Cloud City's Lord, with his position and resources, had never had the idea of using an origin dimensional stone. The most important part about this was that obtaining an origin dimensional stone required a gargantuan opportunity. Besides that, even if you obtained it, your heavenly world may not necessarily expand. Probably only the genuinely top-class powerful clans and sects possessed the resources to nurture a heavenly world into a true world. Li Yunmu had nothing compared to those clans and sects. If he didn't possess the system, he wouldn't have dared to play with it. After the flux crystals worth 1100 millions were poured on the ground, the landmass began to expand even more fiercely compared to last time: 2000 square m, 3000 square m, 4000 square m, 7000 square m, 10,000 square m. When the area of the heavenly world expanded to 10,000 square m, suddenly, a star in the starry sky began to glow brighter than the rest. Their light suppressed all the other stars. After a long while, when Li Yunmu's vision was again restored to normal, he discovered that a great transformation had happened in the originally lifeless heavenly world. The land had grown to 13,000 square m, and emerald green grass started sprouting under the gentle illumination of that star. In the middle of the originally barren land, a small spring began trickling. This mystical transformation was simply a miracle. Chapter 146, Messenger from the War God Temple. The brightly glowing sun swelled to the size of a grindstone and kept releasing trace after trace of imposing energy, illuminating the entire heavenly world. Li Yunmu then felt a gentle power rising within his body, and he knew this was the genuine heavenly world's power. One sun. He hadn't expected that his heavenly world would finally enter the first rank. His sun was only the size of a grindstone, which was quite far from the enormous 7 stars of the Flux Ancestor, its volume reaching only 1/10 of the Ancestor's stars, but it was still a huge step forward for Li Yunmu. Now that his heavenly world had entered the 1-star rank, he could be considered to have touched the threshold of World Master, though he could only be considered green at the moment. He still had a long way to go. Somewhere deep within Li Yunmu there was a wild sensation that if he wanted to truly enter the ranks of 1-star World Masters, then he must increase the landmass of his heavenly world by 10 times. Presently, his world was close to 13,000 square m in size. Given that the transformation happened at 10,000 square m, if his speculations weren't wrong, then his heavenly world must attain the area of at least 1 million square meters. In other words, the diameter of the area should be exactly 1 kilometer. This was difficult, extremely difficult, but Li Yunmu knew that his benefits would also be enormous. System: what is the extent of the world power that I can currently utilize outside? The amount of world power which host can utilize outside is roughly equal to an all-out attack from an initial stage golden crystal fluxer. After remaining silent for a few seconds, the system revealed its calculations. Li Yunmu's mind went dizzy, and his hands started shaking. He could absorb an all-out attack from an initial stage golden crystal fluxer. What did this signify? It meant that he could launch a fist with its power equivalent to that of an initial stage golden crystal fluxus all-out attack. When the heavenly world's power absorbed damage, it could be said that there wouldn't be any trace left. However, if Li Yunmu used his heavenly world's power to attack, then his secret might be exposed. Thus, Li Yunmu didn't intend to use this power to attack unless it was absolutely necessary. Otherwise, it would be like openly declaring to others that he possessed a heavenly world. This time, the generous profits from hunting rooster dragons had doubled his confidence. After the transformation in the heavenly world, he certainly possessed the strength to walk tall in the fifth dimension. If the triple-layer defense of Admiralty cover, King's crystal armor, and iron body were added into the mix, then unless a rainbow crystal fluxer attacked him, he wouldn't feel threatened. Furthermore, if the golden crystal fluxers that attacked him didn't have at least a B-grade killing skill, he wouldn't even need to move. His opponents would simply be unable to break his defense. Li Yunmu walked to the spring head in the center and curiously drank a bit of water to check its quality. The results were somewhat disappointing. This wasn't a spirit spring. A heavenly world with one sun couldn't produce spirit-grade water. Although it was sweet in flavor, but it was still ordinary water. If one insisted on finding a real difference between this water compared to that in the outside world, then it would be that this water was completely pure, without any contamination. However, this was still quite an exciting event. In the future, Li Yunmu would no longer need to rely on the outside world for the supply of water, even if the spring wasn't very large, only 1 meter in diameter. The starlight of the many small stars and the recently congealed enormous sun gave birth to the spring head. As it slowly absorbed more of it, it gradually began to rise up. Li Yunmu was completely exhausted after hunting rooster dragons for the whole night. He laid down on the small grass and immediately went to sleep. At this time, 2 groups of visitors arrived at the city lord's residence of Heavenly Cloud City. The first group of visitors had come from the H.A.C.K city. The entire central continent had altogether 1 central city, 3 king cities, and 7 secondary grade cities. The latter all controlled huge territories, scattered among nearly 1,000 small cities which were freely spread across the entire central continent. However, the region which housed the true authority of the central continent, where the truly formidable people gathered, wasn't that of the secondary cities. It belonged to the 3 king cities and the central city. All the fluxers and resources at the top of the pyramid of central continent gathered at each of the king cities. Although the city lord of the Heavenly Cloud City was a border lord and ruled over the lives of countless people in a large territory, the idea of revolt had never entered his mind. After all, the most formidable people in the hierarchy of humanity were almost entirely concentrated in the 3 king cities. For example, Li Yunmu was conferred the title of one of the 36 heavenly major generals by the H.A.C.K city soon after he advanced past the 15th level in the Tower of Glory. This time, the visitor from Hangzhou city was a special envoy that was a flux master. He led a squad of King Guard troops to protect Li Yunmu while they brought him to report to Hangzhou city. The envoy had heard that after coming out of the Tower of Glory, Li Yunmu was received by the people of the city lord's mansion and had come directly here. The person who welcomed this group was Lin Yuero. In front of her, a temporal flux master, even the special envoy of King City had to put aside his arrogant expression. This was not because Lin Yuero was the daughter of the city lord, but because she was a heavenly genius who had already entered the temporal layer before she was even 20 years old. Not to mention that she was supported by a sect. Only the top-tier clans with their formidable reserves could contend against the influence of sects. Each one of them had a flux sage sitting on top of it. Besides, Heavenly Cloud City had control over 136 small cities, but it only had 3 sects, Blue Cloud Sect, Heavenly Moon Sect, and Lingshuang Sword Sect. In the end, the trip of this king city's special envoy was completely in vain, because Li Yunmu had long ago returned to the 5th dimension. When the special envoy received this news, he was stunned. He hadn't expected that Lin Yuero would receive the special envoy on Li Yunmu's behalf. I wonder what is the relationship between Miss Lin and Heavenly General Li, the special envoy asked suspiciously. My father betrothed me to Li Yunmu. Lin Yuero hesitated for a heartbeat before answering, and her cheeks colored slightly, which was an unusual sight. She didn't know why her heart, which had at first somewhat resisted accepting Li Yunmu, had undergone a subtle transformation. Haha, congratulations! The special envoy of the King City paused for a moment, and then revealed a hint of an indescribable smile. Before long, the delegation from the War God Temple also arrived. This delegation included only a 20-year-old woman whose entire body emitted coldness. She had a cultivation base of temporal stage. The presence excluded by her was completely different from that of Lin Yuero. A vorpal broadsword hung on her back, brimming with the aura of slaughter. Everyone whom she passed by took note to get farther away from her. Even the special envoy's complexion darkened under the pressure excluded by this woman. She the representative of the War God Temple, not the War Shrine but the War God Temple itself. If the War Shrine could be considered as a huge monster in terms of power and influence, then the War God Temple was its core force. Every person coming from there had heaven-defying battle prowess, and given their combat potential, their chances of entering the Sage Layer were very high. This is Li Yunmu's qualifications to enter trial by fire. He has 3 months' time to prepare. Since he isn't present at the City Lord's mansion, then I will give it to you, to pass it to him. The War God Temple's envoy threw a sealed letter towards Lin Yuero. It was just an ordinary, traditional letter. Any person who picked it up could falsely claim it as their own, but none dared to do so. This was because this letter was issued by the War God Temple, so those who dared vanished from the world without a trace. Lin Yuero's expression turned serious. A formless strength surged through her hands and she caught the letter easily, but her body was forced to retreat a few steps and cracks, resembling a spider web, spread over the ancient cyan-colored bricks under her feet. Everyone's hearts sank. The people from the War God Shrine were too powerful, and their type of power produced a sense of dread in everyone around them. In terms of innate talent, Lin Yuero, who had entered the temporal layer before she reached 20, was clearly more talented compared to the woman from the War God Temple. But if one was judging in terms of combat strength, this woman had made Lin Yuero retreat 3 steps with just a letter written on ordinary paper. From this exchange, the ferociousness of every person coming from the War God Temple was clearly proved. I will deliver it to him, Lin Yuero said with a nod. All right. You're not too bad yourself, however, your nature is too soft, you're not suitable to enter the War God Temple. The woman carrying an executioner's broadsword on her back immediately turned around after completing her mission and departed without wasting any more time. Even the special envoy of the King City wasn't worth her attention, because the people of the War God Temple didn't care about status. The only thing that mattered to them was combat strength and not innate talent or comprehension skills. The two parties left as suddenly as they arrived. After they left, Lin Yuero contemplated what had happened for some time while looking downwards. Once she came to a decision, she instructed the old servant of the city lord's residence, "You're permitted to employ the secret heavens. Immediately leave for a trip to the setting sun Garrison and deliver this letter to Li Yunmu. Remember to not reveal its content to anyone. Don't worry, young miss. I know what to do." This old man was an old housekeeper of the city lord's mansion. He had been in this position for more than 10 years, handling matters for the city lord, so naturally he had some ability. Moreover, secret heavens was a secret power among the Fluxers. Every member of the secret heavens had at least congealed a golden crystal flux armor, while the boss was always a rainbow crystal fluxer who had congealed his rainbow. Chapter 147, Unfilial Son. After the special envoy of King City and the messenger of the War God Temple left, Lin Yuero didn't receive any other visitors. In the hidden chamber under the city lord's residence, Lin Qingyang had a crazy expression on his face. It kept switching between madness and joy, and he even burst out laughing sometimes. Lin Yuero had told Yu Yi to search and take away everything he had on him, including his stellar COMM and storage badge. But how could they have expected that he had hidden his last trick in the hidden chamber? Lin Qingyang went towards one side of the hidden chamber and lightly pressed a bulge protruding upwards from a wall, and a hidden space appeared. That old man and his effing WH daughter both looked down upon me. The two considered me a trash and I let them do that. No, what I cannot obtain will be destroyed, I will ruin you all. Lin Qingyang gleefully picked up an all-new stellar COMM as a ruthless idea entered his mind. The next moment, a major news, which would shake the entire central continent, appeared on the main forum of the central continent. After releasing it, Lin Qingyang started to laugh heartily, feeling pleased with himself. Li Yunmu, you dared to snatch everything I had. I'll make sure you die a dog's death. Whenever the memory of those neatly cleaned and orderly folded male clothes in Lin Yuero's room appeared in his mind, he would be unable to stop his heart from going crazy. Every time he remembered that night when he was imprisoned and his extraordinarily beautiful sister, whom he thought about day and night and who was rightfully his, was forcibly pushed down by Li Yunmu, a trace of unreasonable madness rose in Lin Qingyang's heart. At this moment, in Cloud City Warzone's official forum there were still many people discussing Li Yunmu, Li Yun, and Li Feng, the three disciples of the mysterious Li sect. If it had been a few days ago, then the news of Li Yun would have suppressed everything else. However, during the past few days, the discussions revolved around only two people, one of them was Li Yunmu and the other was their heavenly Cloud City's supreme goddess. Because these two people had walked together after the former had left the Tower of Glory. Why did the goddess invite Li Yunmu to the city lord's residence? Was it simply to rope him in, or did the city lord have any other ideas? Why did he spend the night at the city lord's residence? Many people knew that the city lord didn't allow any guests to stay overnight at his residence for many years now. Why then did he break his habit and make this sudden exception? This question worried many people. No one could have stopped this situation from developing. After all, Lin Yuero's status was quite high in the heavenly Cloud City, and to some extent, her influence was even higher than that of the city lord. At this time, the latest news were posted on the official forum. A special envoy of Hangzhou City and the messenger of the War God Temple had both entered the city lord's mansion at separate times, which provided even more authenticity to the news of Li Yunmu staying overnight at the city lord's residence. Otherwise, why would the special envoy as well as the War God Temple's messenger, who were certainly looking for Li Yunmu, would come to look for him there? H.A.C.K, what kind of bullshit is this Li Yunmu pulling, even treating the city lord's residence as his own property? Many people had already begun to curse when another thought invaded their hearts. Even the city lord's residence was trying to rope in Li Yunmu. This could be considered as proof of the mysterious Li sect's existence. This thought then swiftly led to another: they wanted to enter the recently emerged Li sect. It was a great opportunity in everyone's eyes, for all the other sects had already accepted sufficient disciples long ago. The mysterious Li sect had just emerged into the world, so it would certainly need many powerful disciples to keep up appearances. While the forum's goers were considering this, a new post which caused everyone to become serious appeared. What? The city lord divided his Pisces jade pendant into two halves, giving one to Li Yunmu and the other to Lin Yuero? What does this mean? Yes, if I'm not mistaken, all Pisces jade pendants in use are in pairs. You're all correct, but the truly important thing isn't this. According to the information I received, this Pisces jade pendant is a treasure, and an extremely important one at that. According to hearsay, it contains a secret dual cultivation technique. A loud uproar rose among the people after the post was read through thoroughly. Secret dual cultivation technique? The city lord had appointed their goddess and Li Yunmu to cultivate this dual cultivation technique together? This time many people's hearts were crushed. However, moments later, a post from the Central Continent's main network was reposted on the official forum. Regarding it, no one knew how to react. Because the poster was surprisingly Lin Qingyang himself. Father has died, the cause of his death being the backlash he received from using a forbidden technique to become a flux sage. Facing death's door, he divided his most valuable treasure, the Pisces jade pendant, into two halves and gave one to Lin Yuero and the other to Li Yunmu. Suddenly, the crazy-sounding declaration, which didn't make any sense before and had no proof, was given some by the repost when no one had expected such a thing. When people noticed the fluxer who was the original poster, they immediately forwarded it, and in the blink of an eye it swept across all the fluxer circles on Central Continent like a wildfire. Heavenly Cloud City's Lord had surprisingly entered the Sage realm? Why had he never told it to anyone during the last couple years? And a majestic flux sage fell due to backlash. Yet this wasn't even the most important part. What truly caught people's attention was the question: what level would a treasure be if it was bequeathed by a flux sage before his death? Many people didn't believe this news, though. They were certain that someone had stolen Lin Qinjiang's stellar COMM and was deliberately spreading rumors. In short, the information leaked was extremely frightening. It talked about the City Lord, a flux sage, the fall of a flux sage, blue cloud sex goddess, a person who had recently been conferred the title of Heavenly Major General by Hangzhou King City, and lastly Lin Qingyang himself. The status and influence of none of these people was simple. This news was just too outrageous, so the majority of ordinary fluxers simply didn't believe it. They just laughed it off. But at this moment, the members of countless clans, powers, and organizations spread over the entire Central Continent reported it to their superiors immediately. These people didn't share the masses' reason for disbelieving the post. All of those who had truly powerful backgrounds knew that Heavenly Cloud City was on the eve of a major upheaval. The scale of this matter was unimaginable. Lin Qingyang had personally revealed the most tightly guarded secret of the City Lord's residence, but why did he act like this? Only those who were well acquainted with the inside information knew that this was certainly related to that piece of the jade pendant. The benefits of owning it were too enormous, to the extent that Lin Qingyang had even divulged all his family's secrets to the whole world without caring one bit. Soon, Lin Qingyang once more picked up his stellar COMM and wrote another message in his crazy tone. Once it reached the forums, all the powers on Central Continent felt as if time had been stopped. Ha ha ha, destroyed, completely destroyed. What I'm unable to get, Li Yunmu, you also won't be able to obtain. That most valuable jade pendant is the key to the location of some ancient deity's secret region in 7th dimension. These short few sentences seemed to have been written by a completely crazy person, however, their contents shook everyone to their core. All the fluxers only saw the final few words: the key to an ancient deity's secret region. No one cared about how this information came out or tried to guess about the internal strife in the City Lord's mansion. Even the fact that the City Lord of the Heavenly Cloud City had perished was no longer of much importance. All other news fell short of the attractive power of the words ancient deity's secret region. These few words worked like magic, attracting the attention of all formidable powers on the Central Continent. Chapter 148, Gathering at Setting Sun Garrison. Everyone started to move. Secret region of a deity. These few words were sufficient to rouse all the formidable big shots of the Central Continent. As for ordinary fluxers, it wasn't that they didn't believe this information, but this deity's secret region was just too far from them. Due to this information wasn't much different from nonsense to them. However, those who truly hoped to advance to the next level, they all began to prepare for battle. But the problem was, where was Li Yunmu presently? Not many people knew, and those few who did knew that he won't come out and reveal himself. In the short time of 2 hours, the Cloud City's steel castle in 5th dimension witnessed the influx of a large number of fluxers with a cultivation of silver crystal layer or higher. Many of them had come alone, but there were plenty of them in squads, too. There were silver crystal fluxers, golden crystal fluxers, and even few rainbow crystal fluxers who were preparing to ascend to the higher dimension. All of them came over now. However, all these people weren't there for themselves. They were all followers of the major powers in the Central Continent. A secret region of a deity wasn't a place where they could enter or even glance into. Their task was only to find the path taken by Li Yunmu before others, that was all. Unfortunately, the majority of Cloud City Steel Castle's Fluxers had already entered the Devil Ox Valley battle zone by now. Otherwise, when these high-level Fluxers from every city of Central Continent transferred over, they would have had a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see such a crowd. In the city lord's residence, Lin Yuero's complexion sank to the extreme. She had naturally been informed that Lin Qingyang had divulged the secret on the main official forum of Central Continent. "Young miss, it is not safe to stay at the city lord's mansion at the moment. We should withdraw from here. I'm extremely worried that some flux sage who is unable to endure will come here personally to deal with this matter," Yi suggested. "Doesn't matter. Master already knows about this matter and, when all is said and done, this is still the city lord's residence. I, Lin Yuero, am not only the daughter of the city lord but also a disciple of Blue Cloud sect. Uncle Zhong, you should ask the secret heavens to find Li Yunmu and inform him that presently the outside world is too dangerous for him." The Flux ancestor lived in hiding, but the Fluxer Association, this monstrously powerful organization, still worked according to the guidelines he'd set before disappearing. The might of the Flux ancestor was just too terrifying to act any other way. But in other fields, the Fluxer Association had gradually strayed from its initial goals and had been divided into different factions by numerous big shots, who made all the important decisions and controlled the guild as their private power. In broader terms, this organization was like a dragon without its head. If these numerous big shots weren't afraid of the 6 continents' government intervening, they would have already turned the Fluxer Association into a handful of sand and established themselves as warlords in some big cities. However, even with the present situation, Fluxer Association's chief administrator of a given city was still the most powerful authority locally. Did Lord Sage give any orders? Yes, he did. We're to search for Li Yunmu's current location and where he is moving towards. Whether it's the Battle Sage bloodline or that piece of valuable jade pendant, we must seize both of them. Yes. Cloud City's Steel Castle's Lord Manager had already arrived at the city's guild house, but, since he came, he didn't see the Lord Sage who held the supreme authority in his hands. Lord Shadow, who always accompanied Lord Sage, transmitted the order on his behalf. Lord Manager asked in hesitation, "According to rumors, Lin Yuero also has a piece of that valuable jade pendant. This matter doesn't concern you. You're only responsible for monitoring Li Yunmu's half. Lin Yuero is the disciple of the sect master of Blue Cloud sect, so it wouldn't be good if we made a move against her at the moment," Lord Shadow answered in a faint voice. "Blue Cloud sect's master, even Lord Sage needs to worry about him." "Ha ha ha, Lord Sage isn't worried about the sect master of Blue Cloud sect, but their supreme elder. As long as that old monster is still alive, no one can touch Lin Yuero. You should go now." However, at this time, a person walking in shadows suddenly appeared in front of the two. Lord Manager knew that this was a subordinate of Lord Shadow. He thought to leave first, but the newcomer promptly spoke up. "Li Yunmu has been found." "What?" Lord Manager was slightly shocked. He had the greatest authority in Cloud City's Steel Castle in the 5th dimension and he still hadn't discovered Li Yunmu's whereabouts, but this side already had them? But soon he learned where the information had come from. Surprisingly, it didn't originate from the Central Continent, but rather the side of the new ocean god of the humans in the Northern Continent. The subordinate of Lord Shadow projected out a vague image from the stellar COMM device on his wrist. They could see 3 figures fighting against rooster dragons in the sky. That's right, one of the people among these 3 is Li Yunmu. And if my guess is correct, then the other 2 should be the rumored Li Yun and Li Feng who hadn't yet appeared publicly, Lord Manager said hoarsely. When he saw that Li Yunmu, Li Yun and Li Feng had gathered together, according to the video, he suddenly became worried and felt a headache coming. After all, he was only the main authority of the 5th dimension's Steel Castle, so his genuine cultivation base was only at golden crystal layer and not any higher. When Lord Manager realized that the three of them had gathered together, he became restless, thinking how he'd gotten caught up in the whirlpool between Lord Sage and that mysterious sect. If he had known earlier that Li Yunmu had such profound background, he would have kept the matter of him entering the entrancement realm a secret. Naturally, Lord Manager now didn't have any way out. Very good, this is the Setting Sun Garrison camp. While as to that mysterious Li sect, Lord Sage wants to see the basis for their confidence, since they've only shown their tail, keeping the head hidden. In any case, extensive preparations eventually pay off. It's time for the Shadow family to take action. Lord Shadow faintly smiled. Setting Sun Garrison. Yes, Setting Sun Garrison. Mysterious Li sect's three direct disciples have gathered in the skies of Setting Sun Garrison and are battling rooster dragons. The numerous Fluxers who were paying attention to the current matters, at this moment, considered Li Yunmu to be out of luck in their hearts. Yet they couldn't deny that his person possessed truly enormous guts. After causing such a huge ruckus, he didn't think to hide himself and was out hunting dimensional beasts at Setting Sun Garrison. And he also got recorded by a hunter squad. The people watched attentively as Li Yunmu, Li Yun, and Li Feng slaughtered rooster dragons, who were known as the overlords of the sky in the fifth dimension, and their mental states begun to calm. Most of them lost the effect the news of the deity's secret region being revealed. In the video, the forum goers saw the three direct disciples of the mysterious Li sect gathered together for the first time. The fact that these three were now moving together caused many organizations to quickly reconsider whether they had the strength to enter the currently turbid waters or not. The mysterious Li sect was yet to appear in the world properly and reveal its strength in front of everyone, yet those powers who had somewhat weaker executives, at this moment, calmed down, abandoning the thoughts of capturing Li Yunmu. However, there were still many organizations who were willing to expose themselves to risk and enticed more people to substitute for those who had abandoned this mission. Yet after watching the video sent from the northern continent, many of these organizations suddenly discovered that capturing Li Yunmu might not be as easy as they'd thought. The kid's combat strength was extremely formidable. And now Li Yun and Li Feng, these two disciples, had also joined him. The organizations which had only sent golden crystal fluxers immediately realized that this level of strength wouldn't be sufficient. After becoming aware of this, each clan and organization in Central Continent increased the number of people they had dispatched. Now the fifth dimension was filled with supreme experts, their rainbow layer fluxers. In a short while, a large number of golden crystal and rainbow crystal fluxers from all cities in Central Continent emerged and transferred to the Setting Sun Garrison. The small camp, which was previously peaceful, filled with clamor and noise. The most powerful had gathered. Chapter 149, 6th Level, Outstanding Realm. I'm looking for you to ask about something. Yesterday, you saw an ordinary crystal fluxer being delivered to your Setting Sun Garrison, right? He should be of roughly this height and held this type of weapons. Today, one followed by another, several groups of fluxers came to Setting Sun Garrison, this remote, small camp. All those who arrived here would first ask for supplies, and then would anxiously search for every small merchant, making discreet inquiries about an ordinary crystal fluxer. They didn't provide any name and were discreet while inquiring, because regardless of anything, Li Yunmu was still someone who was conferred the title of Heavenly Major General by Hangzhou King City. However, these peddlers of the Setting Sun Garrison camp would express complete oblivion towards the inquiries made by these high-level fluxers. It wasn't that they didn't want to inform them, but that they really hadn't encountered him. All of them now had single question in their hearts: who was this low-level fluxer that had surprisingly created such a commotion among such a number of fluxers, which resulted in all of them trying to track his whereabouts. The small-time peddlers were then even more shocked when they saw 6 or 7 rainbow crystal fluxers transferring over. Even the pinnacle existences in the 5th dimension had also started moving, and it wasn't just 1 or 2 of them. According to past conventions, rainbow crystal fluxers should be cultivating secretly right now, to prepare for ascending to a higher dimensions. Ordinarily they wouldn't be out, showing up to any gatherings. There was one middle-aged man who ran a small supplies store who was slightly apprehensive in his heart. He was the only one here who knew the truth, because yesterday night he had been the one to provide supplies to that low-level fluxer. Facing the numerous fluxers coming one after another and offering higher and higher amounts for their inquiries, the middle-aged man hesitated slightly, but remained unmoved in the end. This was not because of fear, but simply because last night, that youth had generously given him one-dimensional crystal to settle the bill. Moreover, he'd seen respect for people like him who defended the front line in the youth's eyes. That's why the middle-aged man firmly decided that he mustn't reveal the youth's whereabouts regardless of whatever happened. Still, when he saw the growing numbers of silver and golden crystal fluxers that reach his garrison, his heart couldn't help but grow anxious. He had a feeling that even without him saying a word, a large-scale capture expedition was about to be initiated. Li Yunmu, who was the fugitive which everyone was setting out to hunt, was currently calmly lying on the ground and sleeping. This region fell under dimensional wilderness, and so there wasn't any dimensional space eyes in the vicinity which could act as communication links. Li Yunmu's stellar COMM didn't receive any news because of it, and he wasn't aware of the great event which had spurred the majority of fluxers in the central continent to action. Truthfully, given his nature, perhaps he wouldn't care even if he knew. There is an old saying that goes, those who already have many debts won't care about a few more. Since Li Yunmu was already being monitored by a flux sage, facing a large group of fluxers trying to capture him was just a child's play. After congealing the first sun, the land in his heavenly world had become full of life. He easily supplemented his lack of rest with one good sleep and woke up completely refreshed. He then discovered that the grass which had barely germinated yesterday night had already reached the height of 1 inch, after being nurtured by the gentle sun's energy for most of the day. After surveying his surroundings once, Li Yunmu was highly satisfied that this grass would now be a part of his heavenly world. He walked to the spring head in the middle and washed his face, then started a fire on the ground and began to cook some meat. Only after eating his fill did he stand up. While he was sleeping, he had received the profits of hacking for the first time in the monster battlefield by S.H.A.D.O.W. The number of his space elements had increased to 2,000. Even more significant thing was that the results of this S.H.A.D.O.W, Li Tian, practicing battle skills to increase proficiency were truly extraordinary. Archery foundation skill had finally reached the 6th level outstanding. This was the first time that any of his skills had attained the 6th level. After reaching it, Li Yunmu's comprehension of archery foundation skill and accuracy had become even more terrifying. There was also a new ability added for advancing this far. It was called blind shot. As the name implied, he would be shooting blind with this skill. He would have to close both his eyes and just rely on his outstanding comprehension of archery and judgment based on his other senses. All the external interferences would be blocked with the closing of his eyes, and the arrow would be shot relying solely on his senses. So basically, he wouldn't be influenced by the surrounding conditions and would shoot a true sight arrow whose range would even surpass his field of vision. Dang, this blind shot is a little troublesome. Li Yunmu exclaimed inwardly. This ability seemed just so from its name, but it could be considered godly for a ranged attacker. One true sight arrow whose range would surpass his field of vision? What was so true about it? This meant that it wouldn't suffer from any external deceptions or any other outside influences, the shot would be like an instinctual attack. Sometimes, the objects and creatures seen by the eyes are not real, and many a time, the movements detected by the ear may just be deliberately created by people. Given these facts, this newly appeared ability blind shot was truly tyrannical. Regardless of whatever tricks one was using, including illusions, Li Yunmu could now sense the real target and shoot them with the true sight arrow. Interesting, interesting. Li Yunmu hadn't expected that there would be such a great event after the archery foundation skill reached the 6th level. What does being outstanding mean? It means to stand out from among your peers. Li Yunmu's archery foundation skill had now surpassed the level of humanity's archery skills by far. After experiencing this, Li Yunmu's anticipation to see his other skills gained from reaching 6th level became even greater. Li Tian's harvests at the monster battlefield this time weren't only limited to the archery foundation skill. After accumulating proficiency points for many days, the Violent Blade and Insect Step had also attained the perfect realm at the 5th level. The number of strikes of Violent Blade were once more increased by 3, and the total number of stacked strikes reached 27. With such an amount, the formidable power of these continuous strikes had attained a level which even Li Yunmu couldn't imagine. After attaining the perfect state, Violent Blade not only increased in power but the flaws in its forms also became minute. What is perfection? That's being beyond just skillful. Regarding Violent Blade attaining perfection, the system had previously told something to Li Yunmu. Some time ago, Ling Shuang was casually able to break the skills set at first strike. But that was in the past now. Violent Blade had just reached the 5th level. If Li Yunmu once again encountered Ling Shuang, and she hadn't broken through to next layer, then his Violent Blade would certainly be able to suppress her. Insect Step had also reached the perfection state, but there wasn't any great transformation to it. Apart from the fact that he could now burst out with instant acceleration 5 times in a row, the only other change was that the distance covered when he did was amplified again. When Li Yunmu used instant acceleration Insect Step, he would now be able to cover a distance of 25 meters. If he used it continuously all 5 times, then he would move past a distance of 125 meters. This ability had already reached this degree without Li Yunmu even realizing it. Host, the system detected that many high-level fluxers have appeared in the 5th dimension and are searching for you, the system said aptly this time. Chapter 150, Wanting to cause despair to the enemy. There shouldn't be any confusion about how the system could monitor the outside world. It was very simple, really, because the 3 shadows had returned after completing their fights in the dimensional battlefield and were now guarding the coordinates of the entrance to Li Yunmu's heavenly world. The system could then naturally monitor the movements of the outside world through them. Capture me? Why? Due to lack of sufficient relevant information, the reason cannot be deducted for the time being, the system replied. Li Yunmu nodded, but didn't say anything. It seemed like he had to find a way to purchase a dimensional space eye from the black market. Once he had one, he could use it to link his stellar COMM with the main source. After that, he would be able to maintain a connection with the outside world even after entering the dimensional wilderness. However, it wasn't too difficult to find out the details of this matter. After all, he still had the virtual dimension world. Soon after entering it, he found out the reason why so many fluxers were hunting him. This wasn't because Li Yunmu was extremely efficient in obtaining information. Rather, it was because almost everyone who was part of any group knew of it and were talking about it. Have you heard? Not long ago the Wang family of Snow Moon City also moved a group of silver crystal fluxers with 2 golden crystal fluxers to the Setting Sun Garrison camp. Yet, numerous silver and golden crystal fluxers from every region in Central Continent have been dispatched. All of them are transferring to Setting Sun Garrison, and reportedly even rainbow crystal fluxers are making their move. Li Yunmu took a stroll through the flourishing main street of the virtual dimension world, and it didn't take him half a minute to hear people discussing this matter. So this happened. Li Yunmu suddenly realized everything, and immediately sneered. A large amount of silver and golden crystal fluxers were coming to create trouble for him? If this had happened before he had went to the Tower of Glory, then this amount of power could have been considered sufficient. Right now? They were only delivering themselves to him on a silver platter and nothing more. Although Li Yunmu was thinking this by himself, other people weren't. A fluxer passed by him and joined one of the conversations. All the clans and powers of Central Continent, aren't they just overdoing things by sending so many fluxers to capture one low-level cultivator? Li Yunmu, who had disguised himself as an ordinary passerby, halted for a moment, but then he immediately lost interest. He was now only confused about one matter: how had the secret of the city lord's residence had gotten revealed? Did Lin Yuero deliberately deceive him? Li Yunmyo quickly shook his head. Lin Yuero wouldn't be as foolish as to reveal something related to this extremely valuable treasure, the Pisces jade pendant, just to deceive him. Before long, he returned back to the peaceful residence. There, to his surprise, his father, mother, and Lu Ruyan were all present. It wasn't that he hadn't tried to contact his family in the past 2 days. All of them had already received the invitation to reside in the Hangzhou King city long ago, before he had even cleared the 15th level of Tower of Glory. Little rascal, everyone's outside is talking about how you brought a calamity upon yourself and you dare to reveal yourself. Clearly, He-ji, his mother, didn't know the extent of trouble her son had gotten himself into. Don't worry about it, I'm being careful. Otherwise, how would I find the time to come see you all? Hearing this, his father and mother breathed out a sigh of relief. Only Lu Ruyan glanced at him with veiled worry, as if she wanted to say something. Sister, I'm not in danger. Li Yunmyo quietly gave Lu Ruyan a look filled with reassurance. He then went to an empty space in the courtyard and waved his hand once. It filled with the corpses of all sorts of dimensional beasts. There were ordinary crystal, black crystal, silver crystal, and even golden crystal ones. You killed all of them. After seeing the several hundred intact corpses, the people of Li Yunmyo's family were startled. I will hand them all over to Sis, since I don't lack money presently. Sis can take better care of them. In the future, I will need your help again. After saying this, Li Yunmyo didn't stay much longer in the virtual dimension world. This was mainly because he didn't have much else to say to his family. These few hundred dimensional beast corpses were like a guarantee, in case something did happen to him. When he withdrew from the virtual dimension world, he asked the system to inform him about the general situation. As for the large number of fluxers who had entered the 5th dimension to hunt for him, he wasn't the least bit worried. After all, with the items he had obtained in the Tower of Glory on system's suggestions, dealing with this matter wouldn't be a problem. Perfect, this is just great with my archery foundation skill having entered the outstanding realm. Since you all dare to chase me, then I, Li Yunmyo, will let everyone in the world experience my long-range offensive strength. The next instant Li Yunmyo left his heavenly world. At this moment, Li Yun, Li Feng, and Li Tian, the 3 shadows, had already exited the dimensional battlefield because the time set for the hack had ended. They were protecting the entry point of the heavenly world. Several tens of beasts which had tried to intrude had been killed by them. Li Yunmyo collected the flux crystals from their corpses but didn't immediately open and fill the flux point to upgrade to Black Crystal Flux Disciple. He still needed to suppress his cultivation base for the time being, as he wanted to enter the Tower of Glory again. If he increased his cultivation, the additional drop rate of tower badges would decrease by a substantial margin. Yesterday night, while Li Yunmyo was killing rooster dragons, he had also killed many black crystal dimensional beasts and obtained their flux crystals, so he already had more than enough. If he didn't need to suppress his cultivation base to continue obtaining more tower badges, then entering the silver crystal layer would be as easy as lifting a finger to him. Chu Qingyu, the child of a powerful family of a citadel, could enter the silver crystal layer at the speed of a rocket, so Li Yunmyo could as well. The whole process only required him to throw more resources. Presently, with the 3 shadows, Li Yunmyo no longer lacked low-level flux crystals. He opened his profile panel. Experience points, 9,630 points. Ability points, 58,781 points. Space elements, 4,363 points. Blood Fiend points, 18,332 points. Sufficient. When Li Yunmyo looked at all the amounts, which included the earnings obtained from killing rooster dragons as well as those from dimensional beasts, his gaze instantly focused on the ability points which were getting close to 60,000. Since he knew that a large number of fluxers were coming to catch him, then he only needed to do just one thing, which was to increase his defense. At this moment, the progress of his Admiralty cover had already stopped at the 18th level for many days. Seeing this, Li Yunmu, who hadn't decided on how to spend his large amount of ability points, quickly made his decision. 19th level, 9000 ability points upgrade. 20th level, 10000 ability points upgrade. Ding, your Admiralty cover has been upgraded to the 20th level, the damage reduction provided has been increased to 50%. Ding, because your Admiralty cover has reached the threshold of the 20th level, it has obtained a new ability cover within cover. If host wants to use this ability, he will lose the previous ability of reflecting damage. Requesting host to make the decision. Li Yunmu's choice after receiving the system's notification was clear as day. After upgrading the Admiralty cover to 20th level, its damage reflection would also increase to 20% damage, while the cover within cover would reduce injuries received by 20%. The choice here was obvious. Increasing defense to the point that others wouldn't be able to get past it even if one remained motionless would be interesting. Li Yunmu didn't hesitate and chose the new ability. The next instant he went and activated Admiralty cover. Outside the golden-colored cover on his body, an even thinner one appeared, buzzing with a faint energy.